Chapter 116 to 118. The suppression of the Akatsuki organization had no significant impact on the progress of the Third Shinobi World War. The Land of Fire, the Land of Earth, and the Land of Wind were still fiercely battling in the Land of Rain, with a large number of shinobi dying daily. The Land of Rain suffered once again. Hanzo, the Salamander, and Yahiko were dead, and both the local forces of Amegakure and the emerging Akatsuki organization were heavily damaged. Previously, they could at least protect the civilians to some extent, but now both organizations were in chaos, leading to a collapse of order and even harsher conditions for the ordinary people. Of course, none of this had much to do with Yuto. He continued to fulfill his duties as vice commander, working tirelessly and accumulating a thick stack of accolades once more. Fortunately, in the third week after the Akatsuki suppression, Konoha sent two more vice commanders. One was a jonin from the Uchiha clan, and the other was an ANBU captain who had retired. With one commander and three vice commanders, Yuto's burden lightened significantly, even allowing him 2 to 3 hours of rest each day. With some free time at his disposal, Yuto could finally focus on his own matters. The god's mask had been used up and urgently needed replenishing. Shisui Uchiha held a shuriken in his hand, his single tomo sharingan spinning slowly. Rainwater soaked his hair, making his black hair stick to his skin. On anyone else, this might look quite disheveled. But being an outstanding member of the Uchiha clan, Shisui was not only highly skilled in fire release and genjutsu, but his combination of sharingan and taijutsu was also extremely proficient. He deeply understood the value of love and friendship, and he was handsome. Handsome enough that even drenched like a wet rat, he looked like he was in a fashion shoot. Not far from him were a white-haired girl, Ruri Mochizuki, and the hooded, eerie Muta Aburame. The three stood in a triangular formation, each covering the other's blind spots. Muta Aburame's stance was textbook standard, just like what was taught in the Ninja Academy and his clan, with a precise angle to his body and a perfect grip on his weapon. Shisui Uchiha, however, was more relaxed. He habitually held his blade with one hand, hiding a small ninja tool in the other, and crouched slightly. As a genius, he had his own understanding of combat and wouldn't blindly follow the rules. As for Ruri Mochizuki, her stance was the most relaxed. She leaned against a tree with her arms crossed, tilting her head to look at the insects crawling on the leaves, as if she were strolling and daydreaming rather than preparing for battle. This posture best unleashes my combat potential. A true ascetic dares to place themselves in the most dangerous situations. Whenever the two boys expressed concern about the white-haired girl's casual combat stance, Ruri would always snort and proudly say the above. Is it really like that? Shisui often wanted to ask, but he never dared. After getting familiar with each other, Ruri, with her Keki Genkai, the Shikotsu Myaku, and her advantage of being a girl, would thrash Shisui and Muta if provoked, chanting, "Beating is caring, scolding is loving, not beating or scolding is harming," whenever she did so. He really didn't know where she learned such shameless words. Remembering the nonsense Ruri spouted while exerting team violence, Shisui subconsciously smiled and glanced at her. Coincidentally, the white-haired girl was also looking around out of boredom, and their eyes met. Ruri mouthed, "Are you kidding me?" without making a sound, then grinned, revealing her sharp canine teeth. Poor Shisui quickly looked away. Bang! Colorful fireworks burst in the sky. It was Konoha's attack signal. "Charge!" Ruri Mochizuki's eyebrows twitched as she leapt from the tree, rushing towards the Iwagakure troops not far away, with Shisui and Muta following close behind. Shisui quickly overtook the white-haired girl due to his speed. Simultaneously, numerous Konoha shinobi appeared from all directions, charging at the enemy, and the brutal battle began in earnest. An hour and a half later, the two boys and one girl of Team 9 leaned against each other, their clothes and skin stained with blood, resting with their eyes closed, too exhausted to bicker. This surprise attack ended in a Pyrrhic victory for Konoha. Both sides had committed substantial forces, and Team 9 was just one of the insignificant squads among them. Due to the high-level jutsu clashes, the forest serving as the main battlefield was devastated, with the terrain completely altered, largely due to Iwagakure's earth release techniques. Even a genius like Shisui Uchiha sustained serious injuries in this battle. War is truly terrifying, Shisui reflected, resting alongside his teammates. He and Ruri Mochizuki, along with Muta Aburame, had been in the Land of Rain for over half a month, and Shisui keenly sensed the increasing intensity of the war. Although the frequency of daily battles remained roughly the same, the number of deaths and disappearances was sharply rising. This is the most critical stalemate phase. Each village has gauged the other's strength, so they can often strike decisively. Now it's a matter of whose resolve to sacrifice is greater, Shisui thought, his eyelids growing heavier until he finally fell asleep between his companions. The intelligent Uchiha boy might never know that the rising death rate, apart from the natural progression of war, was also significantly influenced by his teacher, the one known as the Lone Lion. As vice commander, Yuto only needed to add a few lines to the orders to deploy more Konoha troops, thereby engaging the other two villages in more deadly conflicts. He was the vice commander, no longer a free agent on the battlefield. Collecting Hyuga corpses was becoming increasingly straightforward. On the intense battlefield, members of the Hyuga clan would die as Konoha shinobi. With powerful shinobi from each side involved, and the terrain often torn apart, disappearances were merely another statistic on the battle reports. As shinobi clashed above ground, corpses frequently fell into the torn earth and swift rivers, including those of the Hyuga branch members. As vice commander, Yuto could easily predict and even plan the general locations and times of these battles. He would summon a slug and have it hide underground to intercept the Hyuga corpses, transporting them to Shikotsu Forest. From behind the scenes, with just a few gestures, he could continuously obtain the desired spoils, the hallmark of a great villain. In any world, resources always flow to those in power. Since becoming vice commander, Yuto rarely had the chance to leave the main camp alone, but this did not affect his access to abundant information, as those thin papers containing valuable intelligence were delivered to him daily. As time passed, he finally gathered enough corpses once again. Shikotsu Forest. Yuto lay on a slug the size of a vehicle, staring blankly at the sky. Shikotsu Forest is a mystical place, filled with endless marshes and forests, two of the most vibrant ecosystems. However, due to the immense life force of the slug sage, Shikotsu Forest is devoid of life except for the slugs and the occasional summoning contract holder, isolated and lifeless. But when Yuto was here, he always felt a sense of security. When he was a child in his previous life, he liked to lay a blanket under his bed, bring his favorite toy models and a fluffy pillow, and curl up with a small flashlight, spending the whole night there. Narrow spaces make some people feel comfortable. Isolation inevitably leads to loneliness, but in society, being hurt by others is unavoidable. In Shikotsu Forest, no one could hurt him. If only I could become a slug. But if someone is lonely for too long, they might become like the slug sage, right? To seize the opportunity to break free from fate and confinement, deeply cooperating with a human and betting everything. Yuto absent-mindedly stroked the slug's antennae. Yuto-kun. The sage's voice rumbled from the depths. Is something wrong? No, Yuto yawned. I just feel like I'm not a genius. With the help of the first Hokage's cells, I managed to sense natural energy, but I'm stuck on the second step. Sensing and controlling are two different things. The slug sage's voice remained gentle. You are progressing quickly. You will likely complete your sage mode training within a year. A year, huh? Sage. What is Shikotsu Forest's sage mode like? You will see that view, Yuto-kun. At that moment, a plume of smoke rose in a part of Shikotsu Forest as one of the slug sage's clones returned to the main body. Good news, the sage said, receiving memories from the small slug. Yuto-kun, the things you requested have been moved from the land of hot water to the base in the land of rain. You're the best, sage, Yuto smiled. Without you, I couldn't accomplish many things. As the vice commander of his branch, Yuto could continually procure supplies, but his high position made long absences impossible unless on a mission. Fortunately, with the slug as an ally with no conflicting interests, Yuto could prepare the necessary supplies for the upcoming war. Now he had collected over a dozen corpses of his clan, enough to create 2 masks without any issues. The slug had even transported some items from the land of hot water base. With all his cards ready, Yuto only needed to wait for Hiruzen Sarutobi to make his move. He was curious about the strategy and combat power the third Hokage would use against the moon god. Like 2 unparalleled swordsmen, it was unclear who had the upper hand. They both watched each other cautiously, with uncertain eyes, revealing their brilliance only when they drew their swords. Yuto knew that day wouldn't be far off. Thank you for taking me in, Sage. Yuto got up. Leaving already? Yeah, I need to check the progress of the god's mask at the base and handle the items brought from the land of hot water. Also, Yuto-kun, the slug sage said calmly. Tsunade came by yesterday and said she might need to borrow my strength these days. Yuto paused, then smiled bitterly. So my sensei is involved in the encirclement, but her hemophobia hasn't been cured yet. I wonder what the third Hokage is thinking. He shrugged, thanked the slug sage for the information, and left Shikotsu Forest. After returning to the Konoha camp, he didn't stay long. Under the guise of training ninjutsu, he left the camp and arrived at a secret underground base. The underground base in the Land of Rain was near the Land of Taki, very remote and untouched by war. Besides having fewer facilities, it was similar to the underground base in the Land of Hot Water, equipped with a extractor, a constant temperature cultivation room, and a medical preservation tank filled with preservative fluid. Shinosuke Hyuga's corpse floated in the tank. This was what the slug had just transported. To avoid detection, the slug moved cautiously underground, taking a month to complete the transfer. Yuto glanced at the cultivation room and saw that 2 thin masks had already taken shape. He whistled lightly and moved the metal operating table to the center. Shinosuke's corpse was placed on the table. The 2 removed Byakugan were placed beside the body. Yuto then took out a dozen black receivers. These were all he had left, initially intended for making other clones, but Hiruzen Sarutobi's encirclement plan disrupted his arrangements. Shinosuke-sama, you were quite handsome, though not as much as me, haha, he muttered, sorting through the black receivers. When we first met, I had a good impression of you. Although arrogant, it was understandable for someone from the main house. Of the 3 of you, I disliked Naruto Hyuga the most. Despite being from the branch family like me, he excelled in taijutsu but was willing to be a dog. Even if not rebelling, at least don't be so submissive. When I was suppressed by the caged bird, he held my arm so tightly, as if I were his mortal enemy. How can someone like that exist? Truly strange. As for Meiko Hyuga, I don't understand love-struck girls at all, so I won't comment on her in front of you. I guess you treated her very well. When she heard about your death, she almost attacked me in front of the Anbu. I bet you never saw her look at anyone like that, as if she wanted to devour me. Thinking about that day always cheers me up. Ha ha. Yuto chuckled, brushing Shinosuke's hair aside, apologizing. I'm such a terrible person, Shinosuke-sama. He finally found a black receiver of the right size. Testing its weight, Yuto removed his shirt and marked a spot on his chest. Hopefully, this temporary use won't cause adverse reactions. Yuto licked his lips and then thrust the black receiver into his skin. The physical pain was bearable, but the chakra disruption caused by this yin-yang release creation made Yuto frown. Shinosuke-sama, it's your turn soon, after I return your 2 eyes. In the dim underground base, the Branch family boy's eyes glowed coldly. I have a strange premonition. Perhaps you might get a chance to see your beloved girl again. Embedding the black receivers into the body was excruciating at first. Even Yuto, the creator, found the power of the yin-yang release within the black receivers disrupted his chakra control. It took him some time to learn how to let his flowing chakra avoid the position of the black receivers. Afterwards, Yuto transplanted the 2 Byakugan back into Shinosuke Hyuga's eye sockets and embedded a dozen black receivers into his corpse, experimenting with making the body perform various actions. Thanks to his medical ninjutsu training, Yuto's chakra control was extremely precise, making it exceptionally easy for him to manipulate the corpse. Once these tasks were completed, Yuto returned to the camp. Over the next few days, he occasionally visited the secret base to practice controlling Shinosuke, spending the rest of his time on official duties and training, portraying himself as a dedicated and excellent vice commander. A storm was brewing, with no one knowing the final outcome, but both sides were absolutely confident that they would be the ones to laugh last. Yuto. After one of the regular high-level frontline meetings, Minato called out to him. Stay here for a moment. The rest of you can leave. Knowing that the moment had finally arrived, Yuto nodded slightly and calmly sat in his seat. Once Minato confirmed that no one could hear their conversation, he spoke seriously. Yuto-kun, you should know that the village plans to kill the moon god in the land of rain. He is an extremely dangerous individual who has attacked the village twice and must be eliminated. If the village needs my strength, I am ready to fight at any time. Good, but don't be nervous, Yuto-kun. Minato suddenly smiled. The moon god is our target. You don't need to take action, just put on a show. Young people like you are the future of the village. No need to take action. Yuto pondered these words. So, as the lone lion, he was not yet qualified to be the main force in encircling the moon god. What a grand plan. Hiruzen Sarutobi. Please give your orders, Commander. Yuto shrugged, seemingly unconcerned. What does the village need me to do? Here. Minato handed him a scroll. You will return to the village under the guise of escorting a key figure, then depart for the land of rain again. A key figure, meaning a bait. 4 days ago, an ANBU captain defected from the village, and the information he possessed became known to enemy nations and the underground. The so-called key figure is actually something of immense power that the village intends to transport to the land of rain to deal with Sunagakure and Iwagakure. Currently, the village is unaware of the ANBU captain's defection. Of course, in reality, no ANBU captain defected. This information was deliberately leaked. You will act according to this false information, return to the village and carry out the escort. Yuto glanced at the scroll. The contents were completely different from what Minato had said, merely describing an S-rank mission to escort a key figure. It seemed that the real mission details were only communicated orally, ensuring utmost secrecy. The young Branch family member asked curiously, what exactly is this key figure? Since it's used to lure the moon god, does it have to do with a Kekkei Genkai? Yes, Minato replied softly. It's Madara Uchiha's right eye. If I were the moon god, hearing this news, I would definitely come to snatch it. But is it true? It's false. The village doesn't have Madara's remains, but the Hokage and others created a ninja tool with Uchiha's ocular power and chakra to deceive the enemy. Even if it gets stolen, it won't be a problem. Minato paused, then hesitated slightly. Actually, there are 2 baits. One is the fake Madara's eye, and the other is a living person hidden within the team, also part of the escort. Yuto sighed. If the moon god is Shinosuke-sama, then the living bait must be Mako-sama. Your guess is very accurate. Minato patted his shoulder. The escort team consists of 32 shinobi. Only you know the full picture. And even Yuto Hyuga is only aware of part of the truth. Yuto displayed an appropriate amount of shock. But what if the moon god attacks before we reach the ambush point? The strong forces involved in the encirclement won't follow the escort team to avoid alerting the enemy, right? Don't worry, Yuto-kun. Minato reassured, handing him a kunai. The false information leaked was done very carefully, only specifying your rendezvous point in the Land of Rain. And if there's any unexpected situation, I will use the Flying Thunder God to come to you. Yuto nodded, understanding that the village had planned everything meticulously. He and Minato chatted a bit more. Out of caution, he did not ask about the main forces involved in the encirclement of the moon god. After completing the routine transfer of duties, he left the camp openly and headed straight for Konoha. On the way, Yuto released a summoning beast specialized in communication with Nagato, wrote a few lines on a scroll, and sent it to him. He then traveled non-stop, reaching the village by evening. Only Shizune remained in the Senju clan compound. Tsunade was no longer there. With mixed feelings, he packed his ninja tools and followed protocol to the Hokage office to report to Hiruzen. Both men tacitly avoided mentioning the moon god, treating this as an ordinary S-rank escort mission. The departure was scheduled for the next day, and he returned to the Senju compound to rest and prepare, passing a quiet night. At dawn the next day, he arrived at the village gate. Under the morning light, he glanced back at the Hokage office, wondering if Hiruzen was still inside. After a while, the escort team assembled. The team was a standard S-rank escort formation. Besides Yuto, there were 2 newly promoted Jonin, and out of the 32 shinobi, half were sensory and medical types. Yuto Hyuga was among them, accompanied by branch family sacrificial guards. In the center of the team was a luxurious carriage pulled by horses, with thick curtains obscuring the view inside. To outsiders, seeing Yuto and his team would only lead them to think, this team must be protecting a high-ranking official from the Land of Fire, escorting him on a diplomatic mission. I am Yuto Hyuga, the captain of this escort team. He began the routine briefing. Finally, he approached the window of the carriage, gently lifting a corner of the curtain and respectfully asked, Sir, shall we depart now? All right, yes, sir. After the performance, Yuto straightened up. The sir said to proceed as scheduled, so let's move out.